Hi, it's Wendy Jensen here, and I welcome you to my YouTube channel, Thriving After Mormonism. And if you like what you hear today about what I'm going to talk about how to get over your missing your child's temple wedding, then please subscribe to my channel and click the bell so that you'll get notifications whenever I send out a new video. So I wanted to share today my own story about my daughter after I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, to pursue another spiritual path. My daughter last year is still in church, and she's met a really, really fine young man. I love him, and they're a good match and a good couple, and I'm so excited that they were going to get married. And so we had the question of whether or not they would be married in the temple. And this really wasn't a question for her fiance. He's a returned missionary, and he's been trained his whole life for this special day to marry the right person at the right time in the right place. And that's what all young Mormon men are conditioned to believe since they were just tiny little babies. And so, of course, this was something that was important to him. It was something that was taught to my daughter, but since then her family had kind of migrated away from the church, if you will. And so she really wasn't set on it, but because it was important to him, she made it important to her. And I did not want to get in the middle of that. But to say that I wasn't hurt, that I wasn't going to be there, would not be telling the truth. However, I had raised her to be this way. I had raised her to be obedient. I had raised her in an environment that taught that the temple was the paramount thing. For an LDS young woman to be married in the temple was huge. And so I could not blame her for wanting that as well. And they were such a beautiful couple, and I didn't want to interfere. And again, to say I wasn't hurt, that I wasn't going to be there for that emotional, intimate moment when they both say yes to each other. I can't say that I wasn't disappointed or that I wasn't hurt. In fact, I was hurt a lot. And we realized that out of her four siblings and her parents, the only one in her immediate family that was going to be able to be there would be her oldest sister. And so she would be the only family member in the room. She had aunts and uncles to be there to support her, and a grandma that would be there to support her, and her in-laws to be there to support her, but no family members other than her oldest sister, which I'm glad at least she had her. So this was kind of a big deal for me. And the first thing I realized is how ignorant and how insensitive I had been to other mothers and fathers who had not been allowed to be a part of their child's wedding ceremony, and how isolating that is, and how non-inclusive, and how it just hurts to raise your child your whole life and for them to make the biggest decision in your life, and for that decision to be consummated, you don't get to be there for that event because of a policy in the religion, whether you subscribe to it or not. The religion has claimed to have that event and to hold it to themselves, and only those that they deem worthy to be in their sacred house, in the temple, if you will, to be able to be witnesses of that wedding ceremony, which I think is just an awful policy. The reason I think it's awful is because I'm not taking out endowments. I am not doing anything there but observing. I'm just a body in a chair observing a sacred wedding ceremony. And that because I was not a worthy member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that I hadn't had my temple recommend interview, and I didn't have a temple recommend, I was not able to attend her wedding. And this is how it is in the Mormon Church. And those of you who have had children who are active members of the church and choose to get married in the temple, this is what we get to experience, not being a part of it. And through their graciousness, they have created a foyer, if you will, for family members who are not worthy to be in the temple to congregate while this event is going on. And then after the ceremony, they all come out of the temple, and you can have pictures and whatnot. And of course, you can have a reception, and whoever you want to invite to the reception is welcome to the reception. But the ceremony, the sealing, is reserved only for those who have who are worthy temple recommend holders. And so this makes it so you could very well miss the ceremony, the wedding ceremony for your own child. So to say I wasn't hurt is not true, but I needed to figure out a way for me to not make this day about me and my feelings, and to make it more about her and the event, and her spouse and their special day. And it needed to not be about me and my feelings. So first of all, I think it's an awful decision to put on to a new couple, whether or not to have a temple ceremony or to have a civil ceremony first, because in order to include family members, I think that's a decision that they should never butt up against that they should be able to invite whoever they want to their day of celebration. And I hope this policy changes. But I was determined that I was not going to let this one event and this one day ruin my relationship with my daughter and my brand new son-in-law. So personally, I can think of no more insidious doctrine than those doctrines that claim to unite families in the next life, but yet they're so destructive and what do you say, corrosive to families in this life, and they separate us in this life. And so I can't think of anything more insidious and more painful in a family than to have to deal with these kind of separative elitists events. So I decided my new belief is that covenants don't keep families together, that it's healthy relationships, it's connective relationships, it's effective communication, it's emotional intelligence, and some relational skills. Those are the things that keep families together in this life. And so I don't think God is going to separate us in the next life. I don't believe in that God. So what are some of the things that I did to change the hurt? Because many of you might be coming against this problem. If you've left the church, but you still have children who are in the church, you could very well be coming up against this problem. And it hurts. And a lot of parents are wondering, how do we navigate this emotionally and relationally with our children? So I wanted to give you 10 things that I did that really helped that day to be a special day. And one of the things I teach in my coaching is that it's not enough for us to wake up and to realize that there isn't just one path to God and there wasn't one path to divine connection, that there are many paths and all are valid. It's not enough to just wake up. You also have to grow up. And that growing up means that we have to learn certain skills that are going to help us to cope in a world where there are multiple beliefs, and where you begin to learn that all of those beliefs are valid. And so you start to see the world in a different way. And this skill that we learn in the part of growing up is what I didn't have another word for it, I call it Picassitude, because it's like Picasso. You're seeing things in a whole different way, abstract, in a way you've never seen them before. And so it's developing this adult skill, this growing up skill, that helps us to be able to manage events like this and times like this when it seems like the church is interfering, and they very much are interfering with our family relationships. And so here are the 10 things that helped me during this time, and I hope that they will help you too. So the first thing that I learned was I wanted to really be clear about what it is I was going to be missing. I was going to be missing 30 minutes, that's how long the ceremony is, 30 minutes of an officiator who is going to talk about the marriage covenant in a very, for me, it was very sterile. Most officiators aren't really familiar with the couple, so it's not really catered to them. the couple doesn't have any say in what's being said to them, and there's really not any kind of intimate connection with the officiator and the couple. And so he's just going to give some words that he thinks is going to support them in their marriage journey. And so I thought, can I miss those words? And I thought, well, I've been to a lot of ceremonies. I kind of know what's going to happen. And I don't know that what's going to be said there is going to be so unique and so profound that it's going to make a difference in my life. I would like to hear that, but you know what? That's really not that important. And so what else was I going to miss? And I was going to miss them sitting across the altar from each other. And I remember when I got married in the temple, looking across the altar at my spouse, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. There was a lot of pressure because of everybody in the room. And then I was being instructed to just say yes to whatever it is the officiator was saying, to just say yes. That was my only part of the ceremony, was to just say yes. And so I would be missing seeing my daughter say yes to the covenant she was making with her spouse and with God. And so I figured to myself, can I miss that? Is it going to be okay for me to miss that? And I thought to myself, yes, I can miss that. Wasn't easy, but I thought, I could put it in my mind and pretty much picture what it was going to be like. I felt sad that I would miss all the tender emotions that happened at that time. So just for those who think that it's sufficient to create a ring ceremony for those who can't come, this is a very unkind and unthoughtful and insensitive thing to do. It's not the same thing because you're missing the actual event. And so it's just kind of this mock ceremony they do for those people who are not able to witness the real thing in the temple. And it's really, to me, it's ineffective. So that's just my opinion. Some people might like it. But I wasn't about to demand that there was some kind of mock situation happen so that I could recapture the moment. And because that would make it all about me and not about her and her wedding day and her spouse and their marriage together. So I looked at all the things about what it was I really was missing. It was 30 minutes of time with an officiator giving some instruction and them looking across the table. I knew exactly the words that they were going to be given to them and the exact instructions that they were to repeat. And if I could see that in my mind and know that that is really all I was missing, that was all. So I thought, can I miss that? And I made it a choice in my mind that, yeah, I actually could miss that. So the next thing is that I remembered my own ceremony and I realized how stressed I was there and how much pressure there was there and how excited and nervous I was at the time. And you know what? I don't remember who was in the room. I really don't. As much effort and energy and sacrifice that my parents made for my wedding day, I don't even remember them being there. It was never about whether my mom and dad are there. But my mom was probably sitting right on the side of me, probably giving me tissues. I have no idea. I don't remember. And so I just remember my own ceremony and realized that it's really not going to be a big deal for her if I'm not there. She's not going to miss me that much. So the next thing, number 3 I did is I asked myself, do I really want to be there? Because if you really want to be there, you could kind of fake your own reactivation into the church and go through the steps of claiming that, yes, you're starting to believe that maybe the church is true and that maybe you lost your testimony, but it's starting to come back in. And you might think this is like a ridiculous thing to do, but you would not believe how many moms and dads actually do go in and fake their reactivation just so they can get a temple recommend, so they can be there at their child's wedding. I think that I understand why they do that, because it's an important event to them. I just think it's sad that the church has set up this policy in a way that causes us to be disingenuous to ourselves and act out of alignment with our own integrity to be able to qualify for temple recommend just so we can see our own children's wedding ceremony. But many adults do that, many parents do that, and that is an option. But it is something that you have to come to grips with, and it creates a lot of emotional angst And afterwards, here's the thing, once you leave the church for specific reasons, if you've looked into the doctrine and you've looked into the history and you kind of really studied things out and it caused you to leave, there's really no way you can undo or unknow what you know now. And so to pretend like you're putting it back in the box and agreeing and subscribing to the doctrine is really more difficult than it sounds. And it creates a lot of internal stress and a lot of internal dysfunction just so you can qualify to be at your child's ceremony. So did I want to do that? No, I didn't. And did I really want to be there when she was making all of those covenants and taking out her endowments? That's the last place I wanted to be. I don't want to be there when my daughter takes out her endowments because I don't believe that what goes on in the temple is appropriate. It is, to me, it siphons off one's right and sovereign authority to lead out their own lives. And so I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to see her do that. And that's just my own choice. So number 4 was, I could throw a fit. I could throw a fit and decide that, you know, it's more important that you have family be there at your ceremony than it is that you have it, you know, in the temple. Why not wait a year? Have it civilly so your family could be there, and then you could get sealed a year later per the policy. But then that really creates a lot of friction between me and her husband. And I wasn't willing to create that kind of friction in a brand new marriage. I don't want to be an interfering mother-in-law, and I didn't want to create more stress into that. So I chose not to do that. The next thing is that I had to deal internally with the emotions that I was angry, I was mad, I was sad. And so I had to deal with all those emotions to figure out where the source of those emotions were. And I discovered as I went deep down inside that that anger is directed at one thing, and that's a policy that claims to force your children to have to choose either to get married in the temple, to get married civilly, to please family. And it's also a policy that says that I can't be present at my child's wedding. So I was not mad at my child. I wasn't mad at my daughter. I wasn't mad at my son-in-law for making those decisions. They have been trained and conditioned to make those decisions. I was upset at the policy. And so I released and let go of anybody else being responsible for my emotions. And I took total responsibility for my emotions. And the anger that I had was towards a policy that I still feel is unjust. But I wasn't going to take it out on my daughter's wedding, and I wasn't going to take it out on anybody else. So the next thing I did was I used my imagination to create a vision of what I wanted that day to be like for her, at least to the point of how I could affect it. And so I realized that it wasn't about me. This day has nothing to do about me. It has to do about them. And so what did I want her to remember that day? I knew for sure I did not want her to remember an angry mom, a sad mom, disappointed. I didn't want that to be an element of her wedding day memories. And so I committed that I would make sure that it was never about me, that it was about her and her husband. The next thing is I realized at that moment that it's never what you expect from your kids. It's more about the kind of mom I wanted to be. And so as we were preparing and having her shower and having her, all of the celebrations that happen before you get married, I decided that I would be the one that would buy the dress, the temple dress that she would get married in. I would get her robes and a temple bag and her shoes and her slip and all the things she needed to have, not just for temple worship, but also for that wedding day. And that would be a sign of support for what it is she was doing. And that was a big step for me. But I tell you what, it was a whole heck of a lot of fun to go in there like a boss, because I was kind of in a hurry. It was right before a shower when I decided to get her dress. I went into the distribution center like a boss, and I'm wearing a tank top and sleeveless dress, so I obviously look like a misfit there in the distribution center among all the white clothing. And I went in there and I looked for the dress that I thought she would like to be her temple dress. And as I'm sifting through, I had another friend come in and talk to me, and he was actually a transgender. And we had an interesting conversation, and just a beautiful, moment with him. And then I went up to the counter, and I had no shame and no embarrassment about buying this temple dress and the other things that she needed for her wedding. And I mentioned to the cashier, that I hope I didn't need to recommend to buy these things. And she assured me that I only needed to recommend to buy the garments. And I wasn't buying the garments, so I got to buy her dress. And she said, and I said, this is my contribution for her wedding day, since I'm not able to be there at the ceremony. And I will say that the ladies at the cash register that are checking out all of these distribution clothes were very impressed. They were like, wow, I can't believe this mom is supporting her this way. And it wasn't that I went in there so that I could get all those accolades and that so I could impress people. It was there because I wanted my daughter to know that I supported her 100% in doing what she felt was right for her. And so it was a beautiful time for me to be at a shower when, 90% of the people in the room are active members of the church, and she opens up the gift from her mom, and it is her temple clothes, because at that moment, everybody else knew that I supported her too, but that I did not support what was going on in the temple. So it was an opportunity for me to define who I was, and to let others know that I support my daughter in her choices. And so that's it was a healing moment for me, just to be able to support her. Another thing that I did on her wedding day, she came over to my house to get ready, and I noticed that she had all of her temple robes in the bag, and I pulled them out, and I noticed they were really wrinkled. And so, because she's the bride, and I wasn't going to be able to see her in her temple robes, but it was important to me that she was ironed and looked beautiful that day. And so I ironed her temple robes. And the temple robes I was taught all through the 30 years that I worshiped in the temple how sacred they were. But there was something, man, I'm so emotional still. There was something even more sacred about me respecting my daughter and her choices than the robes themselves. And me ironing those robes, knowing that nobody's going to know who ironed them, or even if they were ironed, then nobody's going to recognize that the robes are not wrinkled. But to me, it was my way of reconciling that this is my daughter's choice, and I know I want her to show up 100%. And so me ironing her robes was part of the sacred ceremony for me to accept what was happening. And it also let her know that I support her 100%. Nobody else knew I knew that, but she knew. And her brothers and sisters who were there knew. And so that's all that mattered to me. So the next thing, I wanted to make sure that, well, first, before I go into that, on number 8, I had written down that I had this communal epiphany of all of the parents who have been left out of that sacred ceremony. People who had never been members of the church, people who had left the church, and all the family members who had been left outside the room of that sacred ceremony for the sole purpose of worthiness. And as I thought about that, I could almost feel the suffering. I'm very empathic, and so I felt the suffering of those parents, and I felt the suffering of those children. And one of the things I hear from a lot of my coaching clients is one of the things that they struggle with the most is that they didn't let their parents into the temple ceremony, and all the people that weren't able to be there at the temple ceremony because they thought they were doing the right thing, and they can't ever get that moment back. And so I had so much struggle with that. And so I just kind of did an internal ritual and felt all that suffering, that pain, and that struggle from other parents who had been through that. And I had compassion on that and realized that it is really a hard thing, and that it is a wrong thing, and it is not something that I believe Jesus Christ would ever expect. You know, speaking of Jesus Christ and the temple and weddings, and I really hope this policy changed, because it should have never existed in the first place. I believe that everyone, including the wine drinkers, were invited to the temple ceremony or to the wedding ceremony. And Christ didn't stand there at the door and check everybody's recommend to see if they were worthy. No, his first miracle, if we're going to take the New Testament literally, was to turn water into wine at a wedding ceremony, and in a very important wedding ceremony. And so I just thought that that's kind of the attitude that was more of a Christ-like attitude than only inviting those who were worthy to observe the ceremony. Anyways, number 9, I allowed myself to feel all these emotions, and I let them pass through so I wouldn't have them pent up and locked up in me during that day. So they're not hiding that day. I'm not shoving them down that day. I'm not trying to keep them at bay that day. I literally allowed myself to feel all the emotions. And I teach this to my coaching clients, because it's such an important part of growing up, is to be able to improve your emotional acuity and your ability to process emotions. And so I allow myself to feel all the emotions. And then I was able to forgive this policy and realize that it is just something devised by men, and that perhaps, I hope they don't realize how hurtful and painful it is. And I gave hope inside that there would be a day that it would no longer be a part of being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I have that hope will be soon. And the last thing that I did, number 10, is I showed up that day 110% in support of my daughter and in support of her spouse and the choices that they made. And it did not affect me that I wasn't allowed to be there. I had done all the prep work before then, so that day literally could be focused on them. And I was not emotionally charged. I did not feel shame. I was wearing a sleeveless top. I approved it for my daughter as, a dress to wear in the wedding. She loved it and said, "Mom, wear what feels right for you." And I absolutely enjoyed every moment of that day. And I know that my feelings and emotions, processing them beforehand, really helped her day to be beautiful too. And so to me, it made all the difference in the world, and it really healed my heart. And what I realized is that I will never, never let the church separate my child from my love, that my children will always come first. And that although I no longer subscribe to the covenants that I made in the temple, that I would give everything to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some of my new values now is that I will be a mom that will show up in support for her kids, regardless of whether or not I agree with those beliefs. As long as they're not hurting other people, that I support them in doing what it is they feel is right in their life. And that is a new covenant that I make to myself as a mother. So I will support my children's decisions, and I will not be a part of organizations that promotes doctrines and uses doctrines to separate families. And that those are my new covenants. And so I made a choice that the church can't hurt me. I made a choice that the church can't punish me. And I made a choice that just because I don't subscribe doesn't mean that they have the power to rule my life and rule my happiness and destroy my family relationships. And that it made all the difference in the world. So the skill of precocitude and seeing things in a whole different way has really healed my heart, and it has saved my relationship with my daughter, and it made her wedding day a day and an event without all the emotional drama that is very much warranted in a wedding where the mom and dad are not allowed in because they don't have a temple recommend. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you're going through a transition out of the Mormon church and you're experiencing a faith crisis, you can get a copy of my book, Peculiar Transition, Healing the Trauma of Mormon Faith Crisis. The link is down below this video information. You can also connect with me. My email address is down below as well. I have a Facebook group called Thriving After Mormonism. And if you would like to join that, we talk about all kinds of issues that we're experiencing and ideas on how we can start moving on in our transition. And also, if you have any concerns or you have any input or insight about what I've shared here, go ahead and leave your comments below. I would love to hear from you. So I hope this has helped you, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.